is wild enthusiasm.
It is what?
Wild enthusiasm. Stage 2, in conventional project management, is mad panic.
Sounds like marriage.
Stage 3, in conventional project management, is search for the guilty. Stage 4 is punishment of the innocent. And stage 5 is all the praise and honours for the project goes to those people who are not involved. And that's conventional projects. What I like to do is to show you the stages in Dragon Green. This is the start of the project here. This is the finish of the project here. And you want to get from the start to the finish. Now, the simplest way to do that is this. You start here. And you're finished. You jump from the start to the finish. Now, unfortunately, what that means is you get from the start to the finish in no time at all. Because time moves in that direction. And the only things that happen with no time at all is the way an electron will jump from one orbit to another of an atom. Because that takes no time. They disappear in one orbit and suddenly reappear in the outer orbit. So Dragon Dreaming projects do not go like that. The second way is to say the project goes like this. This project takes time, but you see it's a straight line. And most projects do not go through straight line development. What you find is at the start of a project, there's a long period where nothing seems to happen. What happens in this period is the person is beginning to work out the project for themselves. And then things begin to speed up. This is a shorter period, but it's the approach phase. This period happens like this. And what happens is, you'll stand up, you hear about the project, and you think, oh, this is an interesting project, and you take a step towards me. And I think, someone's interested in my project. So this stage here leads to a stage like this. Which is a stage of courtship. You're courting the person. And the courtship stage finishes where we go, we're engaged. We're engaged in the project. And the engagement phase is a lovely phase because in the engagement phase all problems seem to disappear. And what happens in the engagement phase is we have no problems in this project at all. It leads to a wonderful stage that I call in Dragon Dreaming the honeymoon stage. Now the honeymoon stage, if this is motivation, the honeymoon stage, the motivation rises fastest. of any period. But it's also the shortest phase. And what happens is after the honeymoon stage, in many projects, if this is motivation, you get a phase that goes like this.
I can't
And it
see
leads
you.
to overshoot. This is the honeymoon stage here. It leads to overshoot. You collapse. What happens in the overshoot and collapse stage is the first part of it, here, that part of it, is the stage of denial. Stage of denial. What happens in the denial stage is that the enthusiasm for the project is reducing, but we pretend everything is okay. This is the denial stage. And then, at the end of the denial stage, you can see the motivation is falling. And what happens in this stage is that when the enthusiasm falls, it gets to the stage that you can't deny that enthusiasm is falling. And so what happens then is conflicts begin to arise. And the way in which the group deals with conflict at this stage is through compromise. They compromise. But what we forget, and what Dragon Dreaming teaches us, is that compromise is the beginning of a win-lose game. The reason why is Renato and I are having a conflict, and we compromise. That means you don't get 100% of what you want, and I don't get 100% of what I want. But in trying to build that compromise, I try to make sure that you lose more than I lose. So it is a win-lose game. The compromise gets to about there. And there to there. And then I say it's the stage of the 3 F's. The first F is fight. Actually, it's the second F. The first F is freeze. The second F is the fight. And the third F is to flee. And so what happens then is people begin to leave the project. The final stage is the depression stage. This bloody project, why did I ever get involved in this? Oh God. I've got my head red, you know. This is stupid. I've been here before, you know. You'd think I would have learned the lesson by now. It's a stage of depression. And the depression stage is the stage that can last for some time and can lead to the collapse, total collapse of the project. Now, what happens then is that we cannot stay depressed for a long time, except suicide. So there is the slow recovery phase, and we return to what we think of as normal with the start, because the project's come to an end and we're back at the beginning again. So it tends to go like this. And we haven't achieved the project. To achieve the project, what we need to recognise is there's two phases. There's a phase that goes like this, and then there is a phase that goes like this. And that is the graph for a sustainable project. Now that graph is based on a mathematical formula that will show us what is the position along the line. You see, this position here, which is the stage of sustainability of your project, the project has achieved sustainability and keep going, is called the K phase, from the German word Kapazität, meaning the capacity, the limit. There is another expression that I need to explain to you, which is this here. What determines that curve is the rate of change, R. The rate of change. How fast are things changing? And what happens, this is a positive feedback here, which means that the change, each change adds to the previous change and therefore increases the base, and so it goes a bit faster. When it hits what is known as the point of inflection here, it works the opposite direction. Negative feedback doesn't mean it's bad or wrong. It just means that instead of adding to the speed, it starts to subtract to the speed until it reaches the point K. Now the final curve I want to show you is the work curve. Project. And the work curve goes like this. What does that mean? The work curve shows that the amount of work we need to do to build a sustainable project rises. And it rises and rises and rises until it reaches the point of inflection. And at the point of inflection, for a sustainable project, the amount of work should start to decline. If the amount of work does not start to decline at the point of inflection, then you are not building a sustainable project. If the amount of work does not start to decline, it means that you're going to head into an overshoot and collapse. And there's a number of projects that have shown overshoot and collapse. Like the internet overshoot at the beginning of the year 2000. It went into a stage of wild enthusiasm, and you had increasing numbers of websites and everything else, but the amount of work needed to keep everything going just became too great, and the systems collapsed. It's also that the systems collapse with economic bubbles when they burst. An economic bubble, as I said, is the stage of wild enthusiasm but cannot be sustained. It is in the overshoot. and it's likely to fall again. Now, there's a reason why the honeymoon stage comes to an end. And what happens is, you look at those curves. The first stage, when it gets to halfway, which is about there, that already takes that amount of work just to get halfway towards the sustainability. And people look at that amount of work and they say, my goodness, I'm working at that level just to achieve that. To achieve this, I need to achieve twice that. And that leads to a fall in motivation. Because they cannot achieve twice that. They don't have the capacity to work twice as hard as they are at that stage in the project. And I say that's one of the reasons why we find the dreaming stage is the stage of enthusiasm, but in the planning stage, when you begin to see all the tasks that are necessary to achieve your project, motivation tends to fall. It tends to fall. But if people can be aware of these stages of a typical project, they can take account of this and make sure it doesn't happen.